Okay, we're going to do a quick video on adaptations for exchange. This is not the same as paper 2, topic 7, adaptations of organisms. This is focusing on more kind of general adaptations, and it actually encompasses lots of the specifications, so it's just a few handy tips for various things. So it actually comes up in cell specialization, so in particular how cells are specialized to carry out a particular function. These are the main cells they want you to be aware of, so sperm, nerve, muscle for an animal, root hair cell, xylem and phloem. We'll talk about those examples in a second. It then of course has links to transport and cell transport, and we're going to look at multicellular organisms and how that links to surface area, diffusion pathway, blood supply and ventilation, so key adaptations. Then more specific examples when it comes to the structure and function of the human heart, lungs, including how lungs are adapted for exchange, and then we're going to look at arteries, veins and capillaries. So we'll then finish by looking at adaptations of plants. We have specific examples with root hair cell, xylem and phloem, and then there are other examples when it comes to adaptations for plant defense. I'd say in terms of the adaptations for plant defense you need to be aware of, actually just reading this part of the specification is the most useful. So you have physical defense, chemical defense and mechanical adaptations. They are more linked to other things that could also be in paper 2. I'm thinking about more kind of ultrastructure adaptations. So as I said, the main focus really of today's quick video is on general adaptations for exchange. We'll look at a few specific and common examples in animals and a few specific examples in plants, and then of course finish with some past paper questions. So specialized cells, whenever they're talking about specialized cell, and then we talk about, the type of question you'd get would be explain how. They then give you the type of cell is adapted for its function. Yes, they could ask you specific examples like a sperm cell, a nerve cell, a muscle cell, but the reality actually is this is where they can get you to apply your knowledge and get you to really think about particular organelles. And this is just, the reality is they're all pretty similar. So the first one I would always talk about in any really adaptation of a particular cell would be mitochondria. Well, why mitochondria? Mitochondria is where aerobic respiration occurs, which releases energy, and I'd say pretty much every cell will need that as an adaptation. Second adaptation of cells would often be ribosomes. Why ribosomes? Ribosomes are the site of protein synthesis. Well, how is that relevant? That's where you do have to link it to the cell. So for example, it could be a cell involved in digestion, where you'd be talking about enzymes. It could be a cell that's involved in transport, and that could be carrier proteins. It could be a cell that's involved in the endocrine system, and that would be hormones. So just being aware of that. If another adaptation is all about exchange, a very important organelle is the microvilli. Key thing, the microvilli is an organelle. Villi is a structure in the small intestine. Microvilli are on the cell. So if this is my cell, this would be the organelle on top of my cell. So it's an adaptation. Microvilli increase the surface area, and that would usually be if you're relating it to exchange. So specific examples now about structures. Alveoli is involved in the human respiratory system, or mammalian respiratory system. So just kind of general structure, first of all, we have our trachea. Our trachea has got cartilage. Cartilage provides structural support. The trachea then splits into two bronchi, and the bronchi split into lots and lots of bronchioles. They, of course, then are my lungs. Okay. Another adaptation of the human respiratory system, which I'm just going to talk about very briefly, I'd find this in my trachea and my bronchi. We have a group of cells. So we've got ciliated epithelial cells, and they are cilia hairs which waft microbes out. And then you've got goblet cells. And the goblet cells are the things that produce the sticky mucus, which it then sticks to. So they always work together. But I want to focus on the alveoli. So at the end of my bronchioles, I find millions, close to about 400 million alveoli. So first of all, there are millions of them. Each one looks a little bit like that. Due to their shape, they have a large surface area. They are also one cell thick. Each alveoli has a capillary, so they have a copious blood supply. And the kind of final higher level piece of work is actually every alveoli epithelial cell has actually got lots of elastic tissue. And that allows for something called elastic recoil. So getting bigger and smaller allows to take in that air and then ventilate. So that's the process of ventilation, which is the taking in and out of air. Circulatory system then, probably the most simple one to start with would be a red blood cell itself. So a red blood cell is biconcave, which increases the surface area. So what we're talking about there is it provides more area for oxygen to enter. Second adaptation is it has no nucleus, which means it has more space for hemoglobin. And then we have our three vessels. So the three types of blood vessels: arteries, which take blood away from the heart; veins, which take blood into the heart; and capillaries. And how are they adapted for their function? Well, the artery is pumping blood at high pressure and at high velocity. In order to maintain that, it has elastic tissue and muscle. The vein has blood at low pressure. So to counter that, it has a wide lumen, so it reduces that resistance, and it also has valves to prevent the backflow of blood. And then finally, we have the capillaries, which is where exchange happens. Key thing for the capillaries is they are one cell thick. Why is that important? It means there is a short diffusion pathway. Small intestine, the classic one that comes up then is the small intestine. So a couple of things to mention there. So first of all, as I was mentioning earlier, in terms of the structure of the small intestine itself is folded. So these folds are the villi. And if you imagine that the food is travelling inside your small intestine, inside the lumen of your small intestine. So you've got all of the monomers which have been broken down by the enzymes into their polymers. They are floating around here, and you want them to be transported from the lumen into the bloodstream. Okay? So if you think about it like this is the lining of my small intestine. And this lining is made up of thousands of cells. And these cells are called, so if I take one example here, each cell looks a bit like this. And these are called villous epithelial cells. Okay, so adaptations. Well, first of all, it has lots of blood. The blood is constantly flowing to maintain the concentration gradient. So as things go in, they quickly get moved on. As you can see from our diagram, the distance is 1 cell thick, so it's a short diffusion pathway. The villi themselves, them having this folded structure, creates a large surface area. The individual cells have got microvilli, which further increase the surface area. And then inside, I have these organelles. The main organelle we're talking about is the mitochondria. For aerobic respiration, to release energy, for active transport, to move things against the concentration gradient. And finally, these epithelial cells also have lots of ribosomes, where protein synthesis occurs to produce enzymes and carrier proteins. So if it was a 6-mark question, those are the things we should be mentioning. Plants then, 2 things just to focus on in terms of the adaptations of plants. This is the ultrastructure of a leaf. So if you were to zoom in on a leaf, if I were to zoom in on a leaf, this is what I'm getting, okay? And you can see there's lots of different adaptations. We've got the waxy cuticle, which is the impermeable waterproof layer at the top. We've got the palisade cells in the middle, which have the largest surface area. They have the largest surface area because it's there where we want to absorb all the light for photosynthesis. We have air spaces, which allows for the diffusion of gases. We've got the stomata at the bottom, which is just a hole. And we've got our guard cells, which control the opening and closing. And the final thing I just wanted to mention, there are 2 vessels that travel up and down the stem. We have our xylem, which is a continuous tube from bottom to top, which transports water and mineral ions. And then we have our phloem, which is a sectioned tube where things can move up and down from either leaf to roots or from roots all the way up to leaves. Key thing to note is that the phloem has these cells called companion cells. The companion cells have lots and lots of mitochondria. The mitochondria is where aerobic respiration occurs to release lots of energy. In this case, it's for active transport of sugars into the phloem. So that's just an overview really of lots of different adaptations. In particular, you'll have noticed there's trends in terms of the fact that actually most of the time we're just talking about large surface area to increase the opportunities for things to move in and out. mitochondria to release energy for either active transport or just energy in itself, so it could be for movement. It could be ribosomes to have proteins, so protein synthesis occurring. It's one cell thick to have a short diffusion distance. It's often a copious blood supply, which allows for it to maintains a concentration gradient. So they're kind of the things you should be talking about. Key thing for you now then is just to try some past paper questions. So here is a classic question. You can see the question I've actually put at the bottom here. So explain how the villi and alveoli are adapted for the bloodstream. Use the diagrams in your answer. So they give you lots of clues here in the question. So pause it. Take about 5 minutes to answer that. And here is the mark scheme. Another question here then about how gills, again, use the advantage, use the diagram to help you. Explain how the gills will maximise exchange, so pause it and answer that question. Again, here's the mark scheme for that. You'll see there's always repeating the things you have to try and mention about. The flow and transport sugars, you don't necessarily need to see cell exit. Explain how the subcellular structures help to move dissolved sugars from the cell. Well, a subcellular structure is the same as an organelle. We've only spoken about 2, so you should be talking about the mitochondria. You should be talking about ribosomes. I would say in this example, which is talking about dissolved sugars, you're probably focusing more on the mitochondria. So pause it and answer that question. Check the mark scheme. Thank you.